Hello everyone and welcome back to the Racing Minds podcast. This week we're going to discuss about the Qatar Grand Prix. It was a handful to consume, to understand, quite entertaining. Let's go ahead and dive deep into what has happened over the course of the weekend. Focusing on the FIA to begin with. So as all of us know, there have been a lot of antics going on recently with the FIA. They have been firing the race directors and the stewarding personnel left, right, and center. And they also had fines being introduced for drivers even swearing, to which the drivers have penned down a very detailed note and they have posted it on social media, asking the FIA for the justification on how the money on fines is being spent and what is to be done going forward on how the money will be spent, and also asking them to be treated like adults. I think it was a very fair request from the GDPI. Forget about even the FIA coming back and even giving an answer to the drivers. They were more like, especially Mohammed bin Sulayem, responding back that it's none of their business. I mean, that's a bit arrogant for the FIA president to not even try to respond to the Grand Prix Drivers Association and the note they have put out as a whole, as a team, as one. But yeah, that's one of the point for the FIA. And when we jump into the race, even the stewarding penalties, they were all over the place. Nothing was consistent. Starting first and foremost with the qualifying penalty received by Max Verstappen. Normally, drivers will get penalized if they are blocking a driver who's on a fast lap. In this case, Russell was not on a fast lap. He was either warming up or cooling down, and he chose to go faster. And there was a complaint by George that Max needs to be investigated. Especially this was highlighted after the race based on Max Verstappen's comments, which we will get to in a moment. But talking about the FIA, they have given Max a one-place grid penalty for blocking a driver who was not even on a fast lap, which to me has never happened before. And alright, say you're giving a penalty to a driver. Traditionally, what we have always seen is a 3-place grid penalty. Where did this 1-place grid drop come from? I have no clue. It is very, very strange with respect to the penalties being given by the FIA recently. And also in the race, they were given very harsh penalties to Lando Norris, which is justifiable considering it's the yellow flag condition, but it is a tad bit inconsistent at times and way too harsh, as we are beginning to see. And one thing on the positive side, guys, if you observe, drivers have been swearing a lot over the course of the weekend. Whether it was Magnussen over Albon or any other drivers when they're winning or doing overtakes, when they have problems with other drivers on track, they were openly swearing as they used to. Looks like they're not going to care about the FIA clampdown on swearing anymore, and I have not seen any note from the FIA saying that the drivers will be investigated, so I hope that they're being let go and the FIA has finally backed down from something. Coming to the issue between Max Verstappen and George Russell. Max Verstappen has openly put out comments after the qualifying of the Grand Prix that he has never seen another driver trying to push the FIA to get another driver a penalty, because that way Max will be P2 and George will be on pole. Max was pretty much frustrated and he has put out comments saying that he has lost all the respect for George Russell. In fact, some news outlets have been posting out that Max Verstappen has said to George Russell that he will get him in turn 1. And as we always know, and like all of us are never surprised, he has got him under the turn 1. Coming to the race, guys. Boy, was that exceptional. It was amazing. It had a lot of fun. Starting right away from the first lap, you had Max Verstappen get a good enough getaway. George in fact had a better start, but the second phase of the race start, Max was the one who had the upper hand, and as you know, he was very clearly ahead and very well done an overtake down the inside of George Russell in lap 1, turn 1. Lando was trying to get past him. Even Lando got past George Russell and he was trying to get past Max, but typical Max, he doesn't allow it. He was perfect pushing the limits, pushing the car, stayed P1. Exceptional first lap from Max Verstappen. Elsewhere in the back, we had 5 cars involving in incidents. Starting with Nico Hülkenberg having a slight oversteer, and on the way to correct it, he crashes into Esteban Ocon, who then went on to crash into Franco Colapinto, thereby ending both of their races. It is quite sad to see Colapinto having a very tough phase after having an exceptional beginning to his career in Formula 1, but these things, they happen from time to time. All the young drivers, they need to learn, they will learn, and they will pick up from it, and I'm sure Colapinto will as well. And on the other side, you had Alex Albon and Lance Stroll having a similar contact, whereby Alex Albon completely turned around in lap 1, turn 1. So there was a huge bunch of incidents lined up in the beginning of the race. That was ongoing on one end. On the second, it was not that interesting of a race. After the first few laps, you had the safety car, which was because these both cars had to be taken out, which they did eventually. There was a safety car, there's a safety car restart, and Max typically, as you know, is exceptional in safety car restarts. I have been observing Max from 2021-2020. Anytime he's ahead, is in the first position during a safety car restart, he was always exceptional. I haven't seen another driver who's able to catch him during the safety car restarts. So huge props and amazing skill from Max Verstappen on that. Well, the race was going on all fine until about lap 30ish. That's when, exactly when we had a wind mirror. A wing mirror from one of the drivers of Williams. It flew out and it was in the middle of the track. It was on the racing line. The cameraman was focusing on this one a few times. We were seeing it. All of us fans who were sitting at home, even the cameraman pointing it out, all of us knew that this is a safety hazard and needs to be removed. Laps were going by, drivers were going by. Luckily, for about 2 to 3 laps, no one went by it. And on the 4th or 5th lap, we had Valtteri Bottas go up on it. And all hell broke loose. I'm not sure why the FIA haven't been deploying a safety car when there's a wing mirror on the middle of the road in the racing line. If someone is trying to overtake using DRS and they want to dive down the inside, that is the exact route they were going to take. I don't know what were the FIA expecting. It was unbelievable that they had to leave a wing mirror for few laps. Again, there was ongoing green flags, yellow flags, green flags, yellow flags, but nothing was actually happening to go and pick it up. They were just leaving it there, assuming someone will probably eat it out of their way and they will have a free run. And then when Valtteri Bottas finally went over it, even then there wasn't a yellow flag until it affected 2 drivers. In fact, one of them, Carlos Sainz, was actually fighting for the Constructors' World title with Ferrari. So it's unbelievable that something as this, a mistake from the FIA, would have costed Ferrari the Constructors' World title. So you had Lewis Hamilton, whose car was, he had, I think, a wing mirror stuck under his front wing, and you could see sparks flying all over the place. And then you had Carlos Sainz, who also had a puncture because of this one. So they had to then put out a yellow flag for these drivers to come in and pit, and then they put a safety car, that too which had to go through the pit lane, so that will give them enough time to go and sweep out all this trash which is on the track. It is unbelievable from the FIA that they can get away from something like this. Guys, one thing, all of this accountability, you need to place Mohammed bin Sulayem accountable. He is the top of the FIA boss. Whether it's the stewards, the racing director, all of them, they roll up to bin Sulayem. It is his job to make sure all the functions under him are run perfectly and exceptionally. If something doesn't, he needs to go out there and start questioning people, like, what is this? Why isn't this not working? Why are you not putting the safety flag out? Instead of pushing people around and saying it's none of your business. I think time is running up for him and coming up that he has to answer questions seriously, because this could have been a very bad safety concern. We were lucky that it was just a couple of punctures we had to the drivers and not someone being seriously injured. Imagine someone has a tire blast like what Max Verstappen had in 2021 Azerbaijan. it would have been a huge crash, and impacting the drivers, the teams, and the constructors titles and championships. So a very big safety hazard. And my problem is there's no one to actually hold the FIA accountable. Like, well, the drivers make a mistake, FIA holds them accountable. The teams make a mistake, there are similar organizations like the FIA, and the drivers themselves, the teams, holding everyone accountable. But who is holding the FIA accountable, answerable? We don't have an answer. It's all these fans whom we are protesting, saying and questioning things like this online, in Twitter, but there has been no response. I don't think they are feeling any bit of pressure at the moment, but we'll have to see how things will turn out down in the future. With this has completely turned the race upside down. You had Lewis really falling back, and you had Carlos Sainz, who had to go change his front wings, had to get a pit stop and rejoin the race. One thing I would like to mention out here is props to Max Verstappen. Someone who has been driving in that speeds, he has a whole lot of things to focus on when he's driving, and he is still able to observe what are the errors going on behind him in the mirrors. And also, obviously, he will have the data about the gap between him and Lando on his steering wheel. So having the capacity, despite driving at that high speeds, changing the brake balances, observing where your car should go, cooling the tires, heating the tires, amidst all this, he is still able to look back in his mirrors and say, whose error is it? Can you investigate XYZ? So that sort of mental capacity from Max Verstappen was quite amazing. At the same time, I question one thing. If it wasn't Max questioning this, is the FIA actually even going to bother? How are they going to find out which drivers have and have not speeded up or slowed down during the yellow flag session? And due to Max reporting, Lando had got a stop and go penalty, putting him absolutely towards the back. It did seem like a harsh penalty, but it was just and justifiable because of what he did. Under yellow flag conditions, a driver cannot be flat out. Because two things. Second one is he would be gaining over the driver in front, which is not fair. And the most important thing is the safety concern. If there were any marshals going down that track and trying to remove the debris, and you had drivers coming on at those speeds, there is a huge safety concern. So good job for FIA for at least sticking the right penalty on that end, and great job for Max Verstappen to be able to observe and report it back to the FIA stewards. And right after this yellow flags, we had the drivers restart again. Max Verstappen once again getting very well away from the restart line, and you had an issue from Perez and Hulkenberg. Sergio Perez, I think when it rains it pours, and that did show for a couple of drivers this week. It is Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton. Both of them were not enjoying their entire weekends. You had Sergio Perez, who in sprint qualifying, he went out in Q1. Then they had to start him from the pit lane because they had to make changes. And when there was a green light in the pit lane, he was still waiting up to about half a second to go off the line, thereby letting Franco Colapinto to overtake him around the outside by the exit of the pit lane. At this point, it's really difficult to say what's going on in his mind. Maybe he's in a really bad state based on how things are going, so you gotta feel sorry for him. In fact, it was embarrassing that what was meant to be a race for Sergio Perez turned out to be a practice session. That's what the team said, Even Sergio Perez, I think that's what he mentioned. It's more like a practice session at the moment, especially the sprint race. Somehow he got himself in Q3 and the actual qualifying for the race, and in the race, as everything was going well, we felt that okay, he might get a few points over the course of the weekend. I think it was a mistake with the car, where the car turned off and he spun out and went to the gravel, thereby getting no points. You gotta feel sad for him because in the race it wasn't his mistake, but the car gave up. So you gotta feel sad for him. And on the other hand, you had Nico Hulkenberg, who was also not enjoying this weekend. When he spun out by himself and he went out of the race as well. You had up to 5 cars really leave the Grand Prix by this stage of the race, and now you go on to hear that Lewis Hamilton gets a right through penalty because he was overspeeding in the pit lane. It was his own error. Coming back to Lewis Hamilton, he had a handful of a weekend. He really didn't enjoy it. He was slow in qualifying. Even in the race, I think as I was observing the lap times, he was consistently 0.8 to 0.7 seconds slower than George Russell, which is very unlikely from what we see from Lewis Hamilton. He seemed so done with the team, guys. Like, he did a mistake, so he had to go back to the and now after the safety car, with his mistake, he went to the absolute back of the pack and he wanted to retire the car. And as we all heard, Bono was like, negative, you can't do it. Lewis was like, I'm going there, I'm switching off the engine. There was a very cold reply from Bono, if you observe. He was like, well, if you want a 5-second penalty for your next race, go on, do it. To me, it didn't seem like, it's more a very professional relationship right now, what we see between Lewis and Bono, not as much as a very friendly relationship as what we have been seeing throughout these years. To me, it does seem like the relationship might have gone slightly sour between Lewis and Mercedes, but coming to the last race, I really hope they finish off on a good note because of the history of what they have achieved together. It's both something to be cherished and kept in a very high standard, both for Mercedes and Lewis. So I really hope they finish on a high. And on one note, we also had Lewis at one point asking for Mike because he had a question. I especially have never heard Lewis asking for someone else other than Bono on his team radio, which was very strange to me. And to note about McLaren, well, they could have won the Constructors' World title had Lando not done this error under the safety flags and had Max Verstappen not noted it. If Max Verstappen didn't note it, they might have been like almost close, thereby leaving no room for the next race where Ferrari can even clinch the title. But luckily, with how things have happened, the Constructors' title is still alive. So currently between McLaren and Ferrari, there's a 21-point gap. If Ferrari finish P1 and P2 in Abu Dhabi with the fastest lap, and McLaren are somewhere about P3, P5, they would still win. McLaren should be about P4 and P6, and Ferrari P1, P2 with the fastest lap. Then we can start to think that maybe Ferrari can clinch back the title. It's going to be very tight unless McLaren has a race like what they did in Vegas and Ferrari pull out a 1-2 out of nowhere. The Constructors' title is pretty much sealed up with McLaren. But hey, regardless of who wins, we're going to see a very new team win the Constructors' World title in the last 15 years, and it's going to be quite an amazing thing for us to watch out for. One point about Kick Sauber, guys. Finally, a team which I have always and constantly written out over my past few podcasts because they haven't been producing much, doing much. Finally, the car is starting to coming up to them in the final races, and Guan Yu Zhou, he put out, I think, one of the best race of his career in this weekend, getting up to 4 points. I think it was his personal highest score as well in terms of scoring points over a weekend. So really happy for Kick Sauber that they were able to score some points instead of finishing the season with 0. Happy that they would have a few points in the bag, and happy that when Zhou and Bottas are going out from the team, they have a few points to their name. Not Bottas, it was quite unlucky. He would have got some points, but he got overtaken by Lando towards the end, who was on absolute fire with his car. So yeah, let's see how it turns out for the last race. Hopefully they can get a few points. Hopefully Bottas does score a few points as well. And one last thing to note, guys, is about Alpine. Gasly has been performing exceptionally well because the recent update to the front wing was only given to Gasly and not to Esteban Ocon. Due to a result, Gasly had been performing exceptionally well the last couple of races. As of now, we just had a news that Esteban Ocon will be leaving Alpine for the final race of the season because this way he will be able to go race for Haas in the final preseason or postseason testing, I should say. and we'll have Jack Doohan replace him in the Alpine cars. Ocon could have deserved a better favor. I mean, he has given the team a win from many years, and he has given them a few podiums. To him leaving like this, it's quite strange feeling on the both sides, I should say. The relationship between Alpine and Ocon kind of broke down after the Monaco Grand Prix, which was way back the 5th or 6th race of the season, and till now it has just been going downhill. They had a highlight in Brazil, which the team deserved, which the drivers deserved as well, but now to see Ocon leave this way is sour taste in everyone's mouth. Well, one thing I'm not sure is it the team deliberately pushing Ocon out, or was it Ocon's decision that he doesn't want to race for Alpine anymore and he would rather prefer a postseason test with Haas rather than race with Alpine the next race? I'm not sure which side of the team took the decision. Anyway, it was a very sour decision, and let's see how Jack Doohan is able to perform in the last race of the year. Alright guys, let's wrap up the podcast with that, and next week we're gonna have a lot of things to really look out for in F1. We have a few drivers switching teams like Mercedes and Hamilton parting ways, Sainz and Ferrari parting ways, and a few drivers having their last ever F1 Grand Prix, probably Valtteri Bottas, Guan Yu Zhou, Kevin Magnussen, who again had an exceptional weekend this Qatar Grand Prix. So it will be something to watch out for. And the race for P6, where we had RB, Alpine and Haas fighting with each other, I think RB is out of scope at the moment. It's very difficult for them to really pull out 10 points out of the bag by next race, and the other teams having 0 points. So I assume it would be Alpine has the biggest chance, unless Haas is able to pull out something out of the bag and claim that P6 position, and we have the constructors title to look forward to. It's going to be a bunch of goodbyes, a bunch of big fights to look forward to for Abu Dhabi. So let's go ahead, enjoy the final race of the season, and I'll meet you then. Thank you.